What the fuck is up, listeners? We're ditching the pleasantries and diving headfirst into the Middle East, a place everyone seems to have a fucking opinion on. But few truly understand. We've got an expert here to cut through the bullshit and give us the real goddamn lowdown.
Let's do this.
First off, even the name Middle East sounds like some made-up crap. Who the hell came up with that?
Well, it's a term born from a Western perspective. Imagine looking east from Europe and boom, there it is, in the middle. British and European powers coined it in the early 20th century, replacing older terms like Near East, which, to be fair, wasn't much better.
So it's basically a colonial hangover, implying Europe is the center of the fucking universe.
Yeah.
No wonder people are pissed.
Exactly. Alternatives like West Asia or Southwest Asia are gaining traction because they're more geographically accurate and less biased. It's like calling the U.S. East Canada. It just doesn't sit right.
Okay, labels aside. Where the hell is this place exactly? I've seen maps that look like someone sneezed on a dartboard.
The borders are fuzzy, that's for sure. Generally, we're talking about the Arabian Peninsula. So countries like Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, and the UAE. Then there's the Levant. That's Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, and Palestine. Egypt, even though it's in Africa, often gets lumped in too. Turkey and Iran are kind of on the edges, always causing a stir.
So it's a goddamn mix of geography, culture, and political headaches.
You could say that. And it gets even more confusing with terms like the Near East, which used to include the Balkans and the Ottoman Empire, or the Greater Middle East, which sometimes encompasses North Africa, Central Asia, and even parts of Afghanistan and Pakistan. It's a goddamn geopolitical puzzle.
Fuck the labels for now. This place is like ancient history on steroids.
Right.
Talk about a historical clusterfuck.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about some of the world's first civilizations. Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, the Levant, all popping up in the Middle East. These were the pioneers of agriculture, writing, cities, the whole damn package.
It's where humans first figured out how to stop running around naked chasing gazelles
Oh.
and started building empires.
Exactly. And let's not forget the birth of major religions. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all originated in the Middle East, shaping cultures and sparking conflicts for millennia.
We're talking epic empires rising and falling. Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, Ottomans, Mongols. More bloodshed than a Quentin Tarantino film festival.
And it hasn't exactly calmed down. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the rise of ISIS, the Syrian civil war. The region is still a hotbed of tension and violence, but we'll get into those geopolitical shit shows later.
Okay, so we've established that the Middle East is old as hell and has a history that's more fucked up than a soup sandwich. But let's be real. What pops into most people's minds when they hear Middle East these days? Oil, baby, oil.
You know it. Black gold transformed this region in the 20th century, turning shepherds into sheikhs and sand dunes into cities.
So how did this oil bonanza go down? Did some Bedouin dude trip over a giant puddle of crude while riding his camel?
Not quite. Oil was discovered in the early 1900s. And by mid-century, mass production was in full swing. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran, Kuwait, and Iraq were suddenly sitting on a fortune, like winning the goddamn lottery.
Cue OPEC. The oil cartel everyone loves to hate. What's their deal?
OPEC, or the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, is basically a club of oil-producing nations, many from the Middle East. They control a massive chunk of the world's oil reserves and production, giving them the power to influence global oil prices.
So they can fuck with the global economy whenever they feel like it.
Pretty much. They can jack up prices and send the West into a tailspin, like they did in the 70s. Oil wealth has also transformed the region itself, creating economic growth in some places, but also fueling corruption and inequality.
More money, more problems, right?
You got it. And let's not forget the wars and conflicts fought over control of those oil fields. It's like a goddamn soap opera with AK-47s.
Okay, let's move past the oil and war narrative for a minute. I'm ready to dig deeper into what makes this region tick.
Sounds good. Because the Middle East is way more diverse and complex than what you see on the news.
Hit me with some of that diversity then. What are the main players in this ethnic and religious melting pot?
Hold on tight, because this is where it gets interesting. While Arabs are the majority in many countries, there are tons of other ethnic groups. Persians in Iran, Turks in Turkey, Kurds spread across several countries, Jews in Israel, Assyrians, Copts in Egypt, and a whole lot more.
So it's not just a bunch of dudes in robes riding camels.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
And the linguistic diversity is mind-blowing. Arabic is widely spoken, but so are Persian, Turkish, and Kurdish. You also got Hebrew, Aramaic, and even some Berber dialects hanging on in North Africa. It's a goddamn linguistic buffet.
Okay, but let's not sugarcoat things. This region is facing some serious challenges, right? Unemployment, water scarcity, climate change. Shit's getting real.
You're not wrong. Youth unemployment is through the roof in many countries, creating a breeding ground for instability and extremism. Water scarcity is a huge issue, especially in arid regions like the Arabian Peninsula, and climate change is exacerbating everything, causing more extreme weather events, rising sea levels, and desertification.
So it's like a triple whammy of fucked upness.
Pretty much. These challenges are putting immense strain on governments and societies, leading to conflict and instability. People are struggling to make ends meet, access basic resources, and cope with a changing environment. It's a recipe for disaster.
All right, time to address the elephant in the room. The shit that keeps this region in the headlines. Conflicts and political instability.
Let's get into it. The Middle East is a goddamn tinderbox of conflicts. We've got religious tensions, political rivalries, and proxy wars that make your head spin. Where do we even start?
Well, you can't talk about Middle Eastern conflicts without mentioning the big kahuna, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's been raging for over 70 years, longer than some countries have existed. What the hell's going on over there?
It's a goddamn mess, that's for sure. At its core, it's a battle over land, identity, and self-determination. Both Israelis and Palestinians claim the same piece of land as their homeland, and both have suffered tremendously throughout this conflict.
Okay, but how did this whole thing start? Was it some ancient blood feud that got out of hand?
It's more complicated than that. The roots of the conflict can be traced back to the late 19th and early 20th centuries. With the rise of Zionism, the movement for a Jewish state in Palestine.
So you had Jews migrating to Palestine, which was under Ottoman rule at the time.
Exactly. And this migration created tensions with the Arab population already living there. Things got even messier after World War I, when Britain took control of Palestine under a mandate from the League of Nations.
And knowing the British Empire, I'm guessing they fucked things up royally.
You could say that. In 1917, they issued the Balfour Declaration, expressing support for a Jewish homeland in Palestine, while also promising to protect the rights of the existing Arab population. Talk about trying to please everyone, and ended up pissing everyone off.
Sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It was. Tensions between Jews and Arabs escalated, violence erupted, and after World War II and the horrors of the Holocaust, international support for a Jewish state grew. In 1948, Israel declared independence.
And that's when the shit really hit the fan, right?
You got it. The declaration triggered the first Arab-Israeli war, and hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were displaced from their homes. This is known as the Nakba, or catastrophe in Arabic, a deeply traumatic event for Palestinians.
Damn, talk about a historical clusterfuck. So it's been a non-stop cycle of violence and retaliation ever since.
Pretty much. There have been several more wars between Israel and its Arab neighbors, failed peace negotiations, and countless acts of violence on both sides. The situation is incredibly volatile, with deep divisions and mistrust.
Okay, what about the two-state solution? Isn't that supposed to be the holy grail of peace in the Middle East?
The two-state solution, which involves the creation of an independent Palestinian state alongside Israel, has been the dominant framework for peace negotiations for decades. But it's facing some serious obstacles.
Like, what? Is it even remotely feasible at this point?
There are major roadblocks. The expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank, the security barrier that Israel has built, and the political divisions within both the Israeli and Palestinian leadership make it incredibly difficult. Plus, there's a growing number of people on both sides who are skeptical of the two-state solution altogether and are pushing for alternative models like a one-state solution.
So the two-state solution is basically on life support.
It's hanging on by a thread, that's for sure. And the longer this conflict drags on, the harder it becomes to envision a lasting and just peace.
Man, that's some heavy shit. It's easy to get lost in the politics and the history. But we can't forget that this is about real people's lives.
Absolutely. There are countless human stories of loss, displacement, and suffering on both sides. It's a reminder that finding a peaceful resolution is not just a political necessity, it's a moral imperative.
All right, let's shift gears for a minute. We've talked about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but the Middle East is home to a whole smorgasbord of other conflicts and tensions. What are some of the other major players in this geopolitical shitstorm?
Well, you've got the ongoing Syrian civil war, a brutal conflict that's been raging for over a decade, fueled by sectarian divisions, foreign intervention, and the rise of extremist groups like ISIS.
ISIS, those goddamn barbarians.
Yeah.
Didn't they basically declare a caliphate?
Yeah.
And try to drag the world back to the Middle Ages?
Yeah, they were a brutal bunch, committing horrific atrocities in the name of their twisted interpretation of Islam. The Syrian civil war created a power vacuum that allowed them to flourish. But thankfully, their territorial control has been significantly diminished.
So ISIS is out of the picture for now.
Yeah.
But the Syrian civil war is still a goddamn mess.
Unfortunately, yes, the conflict has resulted in hundreds of thousands of deaths, millions of refugees, and widespread destruction. It's a humanitarian catastrophe of epic proportions.
Okay, so Syria is a shit show. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a stalemate. And there's a whole bunch of other simmering tensions throughout the region. What the hell is the future of the Middle East? Is it just going to be one big, endless war zone?
It's a complicated question, and there's no easy answer. The Middle East is facing a confluence of challenges: political instability, economic inequality, social unrest, and the threat of climate change.
Sounds like a recipe for a goddamn apocalypse.
It's not looking too rosy, that's for sure. But amidst all this gloom and doom, there are also signs of hope.
Wait, really? I'm not seeing a lot of sunshine and rainbows here.
Hear me out. The Middle East has a lot of untapped potential. It has a young and dynamic population, a rich cultural heritage, and a strategic location at the crossroads of the world.
Okay, I'm listening. What are some of the positive developments happening in the region?
One of the most exciting trends is the rise of entrepreneurship. There's a growing tech scene in some countries, and young people are starting to create their own businesses and opportunities.
So they're not just waiting around for the government to create jobs.
Exactly. They're taking matters into their own hands and embracing innovation and creativity.
That's pretty badass. What else is giving you hope for the future of the Middle East?
There's also a growing push for democratic reforms in some countries. People are demanding greater freedom, transparency, and accountability from their governments.
Hold on a minute. Are we talking about democracy in the Middle East? Isn't that like finding a unicorn in a dumpster fire?
It's definitely a work in progress, but there are people who are fighting for greater freedom, transparency, and accountability in their governments.
So there's a glimmer of hope amidst the chaos.
Absolutely. The future of the Middle East is uncertain. But one thing is for sure. It's going to be a wild ride.
All right, let's move on from the doom and gloom. The Middle East has a vibrant cultural scene beyond religion, right? I'm talking about art, music, literature, the good stuff.
You bet. The Middle East has a rich artistic heritage that has been influencing the world for centuries. Think about Arabic calligraphy. It's not just writing, it's an art form in itself.
And what about the music? I'm thinking those hypnotic melodies and rhythms that make you want to get up and dance.
Middle Eastern music is incredibly diverse, with a wide array of genres and instruments. You've got traditional Arabic music with instruments like the oud and the qanun. Then there's Persian classical music, known for its complex melodies and improvisations. And let's not forget Turkish folk music, with its lively rhythms and instruments like the saz and the darbuka. It's a musical feast for the ears.
Sounds like a global playlist waiting to happen.
Yeah.
What about literature? Any must-read books from the Middle East?
Oh man, where do I even begin? There are so many incredible writers from the region. You've got classics like 1001 Nights, a collection of folk tales, fables, and legends that has captivated imaginations for centuries.
That's where we get stories like Aladdin and Sinbad the Sailor, right?
Exactly. And then you have more modern writers, like the Egyptian novelist Naguib Mahfouz, who won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1988. His novels explore themes of social change, identity, and the clash between tradition and modernity in Egypt.
Sounds like there's something for everyone, from ancient tales to modern masterpieces.
You got it. And the best part is that there's a whole world of Middle Eastern literature out there, waiting to be discovered by Western readers.
Okay, we've got art, music, and literature covered. What about the food? I'm getting hungry just thinking about it.
Middle Eastern cuisine is a goddamn flavor explosion. It's all about fresh ingredients, bold spices, and aromatic herbs. Hummus, falafel, shawarma, kebabs. I'm drooling just thinking about it.
Don't forget the baklava. That sweet, nutty pastry is the perfect way to end a meal.
Absolutely. And each country in the Middle East has its own unique culinary traditions. Lebanese food is known for its fresh herbs and vegetables, while Moroccan cuisine is influenced by Berber, Arab, and European flavors.
Like a culinary adventure waiting to happen. But let's be real for a second. The Middle East isn't exactly known for its progressive social values. What are some of the challenges faced by women and minorities in the region?
That's a crucial question. Gender equality and minority rights are definitely areas where the Middle East has a lot of work to do. In many countries, women face discrimination in education, employment, and inheritance. They often have limited access to healthcare and legal protection.
And minorities often face persecution based on their religion, ethnicity, or sexual orientation.
Right. Unfortunately, yes. There are many examples of religious minorities being targeted for violence and discrimination. And LGBTQ plus individuals face severe persecution in many parts of the Middle East.
It sounds like there's a long way to go in terms of human rights in the region.
No doubt about it. But it's important to acknowledge that there are also positive developments. There are growing movements for women's rights and LGBTQ plus equality in some countries. There are courageous individuals and organizations fighting for social justice every day.
It's a long and difficult road, but it's inspiring to see people fighting for a better future.
All right, folks, let's shift gears and talk about the future of the Middle East. It's a region grappling with its past while trying to shape a new future. Kind of like a teenager going through puberty. Angsty, confused, and full of potential.
That's a pretty apt analogy. And like any teenager, the Middle East is facing some serious challenges as it navigates the 21st century. What are some of the key trends and forces that are shaping its future?
One of the biggest challenges is youth unemployment. The Middle East has one of the youngest populations in the world, with a large percentage of people under 30. But many of these young people are struggling to find jobs, which creates frustration, resentment, and social unrest.
So it's like a ticking time bomb of unemployed youth.
You could say that, and it's not just an economic issue, it's a social and political issue as well. When young people feel like they have no stake in the system, they're more likely to become disillusioned with the status quo and turn to radical ideologies or movements.
That's a recipe for disaster. What else is on the horizon for the Middle East?
Another major challenge is climate change. The Middle East is already one of the hottest and driest regions in the world, and climate change is only going to make things worse. We're talking about more extreme weather events, rising sea levels, and desertification.
So it's basically going to turn into a giant oven.
Pretty much. And this is going to have a huge impact on water resources, agriculture, and human health. It could lead to mass displacement, food shortages, and increased conflict over scarce resources.
It sounds like a perfect storm of shit hitting the fan.
Yeah, it's not a pretty picture. But amidst all these challenges, there are also some reasons for optimism.
Wait, really? I'm not seeing a lot of sunshine and rainbows here.
Hear me out. The Middle East has a lot of untapped potential. It has a young and dynamic population, a rich cultural heritage, and a strategic location at the crossroads of the world.
Okay, I'm listening. What are some of the positive developments happening in the region?
One of the most exciting trends is the rise of entrepreneurship. There's a growing tech scene in some countries, and young people are starting to create their own businesses and opportunities.
So they're not just waiting around for the government to create jobs.
Exactly. They're taking matters into their own hands and embracing innovation and creativity.
That's pretty badass. What else is giving you hope for the future of the Middle East?
There's also a growing push for democratic reforms in some countries. People are demanding greater freedom, transparency, and accountability from their governments.
Hold on a minute. Are we talking about democracy in the Middle East? Isn't that like finding a unicorn in a dumpster fire?
It's definitely a work in progress. But there are people who are fighting for greater freedom, transparency, and accountability in their governments.
So there's a glimmer of hope amidst the chaos.
Absolutely. The future of the Middle East is uncertain, but one thing is for sure. It's going to be a wild ride.
Well, folks, there you have it. Our deep dive into the Middle East. We've covered a lot of ground, from ancient history to modern-day conflicts, from cultural richness to the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. It's a region full of contradictions, complexities, and a whole lot of goddamn potential.
It's a region that deserves our attention, our understanding, and our empathy.
So keep learning, keep questioning, and stay curious, motherfuckers. This is The Deep Dive signing off.